Let me call the meeting to order, but first what I need to do is read this statement we're now required to do, which basically says pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, on June 16, 2022, Governor Baker signed into law an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This act includes an extension until March 31st of 2023 of the remote meeting provisions of his March 12, 2020 executive order. In accordance, this meeting will be conducted via by remote participation. So just want to clarify that legal requirement. So at this point in time, the way we normally do this, we'll grant permission to Westwood Media Center to record our meeting. And does anybody else wish to record? Okay, so we'll go with that. I want to welcome all the participants. I believe right now that I think Chris Pfaff and Nora are in the waiting room. And I actually think you are more than welcome to have them come in. They don't have to wait for the roll call, okay? But I want to welcome both of them. And then we have to do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll do our roll call, okay? So let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we've done that. Victoria, would you kindly do the roll call?
Burrow, Lauren,
here.
Let's see, George Hertz,
Here.
Angela,
Here.
George Marone,
Here.
Chris,
Present.
Sean,
Here.
Josh.
Alex.
Here.
Okay. I don't think I've seen anybody else. So I'm not gonna call their names now.
George, do we know that other folks, the remainder of folks are not
Yeah,
joining tonight?
Alex, we do have a couple of folks who are going to be, they're supposed to be here now. We did have a couple of notifications who folks are going to be late. I'm going to address that in Chairman's comments because I very much appreciate everybody being here, but we really, especially starting in our upcoming meetings, we really need to have full attendance, okay? But we do have a few more joining. Sean, you wanted to ask a question?
It looks like perhaps Caitlin's phone number is on the call. I'm not entirely sure. The 914-774-5172.
Yeah, I don't know who that is, okay?
Looking at our contact list, that
Oh, it
looks
is?
to be Caitlin Jerzak. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correct.
Okay, well, I think I see that. Okay, so we'll give her the benefit of the doubt and assume she is on, okay? All right, with that, I think, can you let Chris Pfaff and Nora in? Victoria?
Yep.
Or does Westwood Media do that? Oh, there we are.
There.
Hi, Chris.
Evening, George. How are you?
And Nora, good evening to you too. We've invited both Chris and Nora to really just have a general discussion with this evening. You've had a chance to meet members of the select board, the school committee, and I thought it'd be very useful if you had a chance, and actually the school leadership, maybe just to have a brief discussion with Chris and Nora to get an understanding of how they view their respective roles as we go forward without having a specific article in front of us. So Chris, maybe you want to just take a few minutes and talk about, you are an elected board with 5 members, but talk about your roles and responsibilities and how you interface with the FinCom.
Yeah, thanks, George. Nora and I actually, we talked about it, and I think what we'd like to do is have Nora present what she's doing, and then as planning board falls within under her purview, then we'll move down to the planning board level.
Okay,
So I'd
that's-
like to start at a higher level. And let
Okay, then Nora, thank you so very much. For those of you who don't know, Laura's in charge of our whole economic and community development. And underneath her are Nora, you have the town planner, and who else is underneath you, please?
All of the land use departments. So I
Okay.
have if I can share my screen, I can walk you through the
Excellent.
Community and Economic Development Department.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Can you see that?
Yes.
Great. So Chris and I are here today to talk to you about what the Department of Community and Economic Development does and what the Planning Board does. Just see how I get this to advance. There we go. So the Department of Community and Economic Development consists of the Building Division, the Planning Division, Conservation Division, Zoning Division, Licensing Division, Housing Division, and Health Division. And we also handle economic development and historic preservation. The Department of Community and Economic Development provides assistance to a number of elected and appointed boards. The boards that were directly responsible for staffing are the Planning Board, the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Conservation Commission, the Board of Health, the Housing Partnership, Fair Housing Committee, Westwood Historical Commission, the Alcohol Review Committee, and the Land Use Committee. Those last two are administrative boards. So I prepared this organizational flow chart to give you a better understanding of how our department works, where we get our authority, and what staff members we have and what they do. So as you're well aware, the select board appoints the town administrator, and the town administrator appoints various department heads. So I have been appointed as the Director of Community and Economic Development. I've been serving in this role since 2014. And within the Department of Community and Economic Development, we have 5 divisions with divisional heads. The first is the Building Commissioner. Joe Doyle is our Building Commissioner. He's been here for 24 years, and he is responsible for a number of building inspectors, electrical and plumbing inspectors, and together they have a building administrative assistant who assists them in doing their work. We also have a zoning and licensing agent. The person in that position is Karen Flynn. Karen has been with the town for, I believe, about 6 years, and she only recently moved into this position within the last year. As the zoning and licensing agent, Karen is directly responsible to the Zoning Board of Appeals. In fact, at 7 o'clock tonight, she'll be staffing one of their meetings. And she's also responsible to the Alcohol Review Committee. The Alcohol Review Committee is a staff committee that advises the town administrator. And that committee consists of representatives from all the different divisions within community and economic development, but it also involves some public safety officials and the town administrator. The Zoning Board of Appeals, one thing I should probably point out, all of the blue tabs on this flow chart are appointed by the select board. The 2 purple are elected boards, the select board and the planning board, and the 2 that are that kind of minty green color, those are staff-led administrative boards. So then moving on, we have the conservation agent. Conservation agent handles the conservation division. She's provides staff to the Conservation Commission. The agent is Karen Skinner-Catroni, and Karen has been our conservation agent for, I believe, 20 years now. And she, along with the Conservation Commission, they handle the wetlands, the State Wetlands Act review, as well as the local wetlands bylaw review, and additional reviews under the Westwood stormwater management. Has an assistant, the housing and land use planner. Both of those positions are currently vacant, and we're seeking to hire a new town planner and a new housing and land use planner. So for the point of time we're in now, I'm serving as staff to the planning board as well as to the housing partnership and the Fair Housing Committee. Then our other division is the health division. That's led by the health director, who's Jared Orsini. And Jared has been our health director, I believe he started in 2017. so just going on 5 years now. And he provides staff to the Westwood Board of Health. Within the health division, there's a food inspector sanitarian. That's an open position right now, which we are in the midst of hiring a new employee to fill that position. There's also a public health nurse, and they are all served by the health administrative assistant. So altogether, that's our entire department. I believe we have 13 full-time staff members and 5 part-time staff members. The part-time staff members are all inspectors within the building division. I thought I would just speak very briefly on some of the ongoing projects that the Department of Community and Economic Development is working on right now. We have University Station development. There are 3 active areas within that development right now. There's a Home 2 hotel, which has been approved for Station Drive, sort of behind Gables and next to the Citizens Bank office building. There's a proposed Dana-Farber facility that's being considered on University Avenue. This hasn't actually gotten to the point of board approval yet. It's still in preliminary review by the select board, who are discussing a community services agreement that would be necessary before this could move forward. And then we have core retail renovations. So there are several storefronts within the University Station core retail area, which are turning over. There are also some proposed renovations to the Target property that's in there. So anything having to do with University Station goes through this department. We also have the Islington Center redevelopment project, which is well on its way. We completed Wentworth Hall, that's open. The CVS was completed. Most of the former CVS building is completely full with Orange Theory. And the most recent opening was Neroli Mercado, which opened about a month ago in that building. And then we have the new Islington, I believe they're calling it the Steeple building, which is where the former Islington Community Center was, the building that looks like a church. That will soon have Neroli Ristorante, which is the last space to be filled in that building. As that building is full of several other smaller users now. Then we're working on an application from 24M. 24M is a lithium-ion research and development facility that operates out of Cambridge now and is interested in moving into another location in Westwood at 26 Dartmouth Street. So they are before the planning board now with a request for approval of a flexible multiple use overlay district, a special permit. We also have Colbia Shell and Seasons Market. They are redeveloping a Shell gas station on northbound Route 1 that has gone through the Conservation Commission, and the Planning Board has received their approvals from both of those boards, and they are currently before the Zoning Board of Appeals, where they need a number of special permits, including a special permit to operate a gas station and one for a drive-in. The drive-in would be for a coffee shop. We have a Mercedes of Westwood proposed expansion that will be coming to the Planning Board shortly. The Obed Baker House, flexible multiple use overlay district, mixed use redevelopment will also be coming to the planning board shortly. That received town meeting approval for a change of zone and approval of the disposition of the land. And the developer has the plans ready to go and is just waiting for confirmation from the Attorney General's office on our zoning. We also have a proposed flexible multiple use overlay district mixed use redevelopment for the K&S printing property. That's on Washington Street near Clabbertree Street. I believe the address is 436 Washington Street. So that's an old small building that has sat vacant for as long as I can remember, well over 20 years now. Then we have another mixed use redevelopment that will come before the planning board shortly. This one was both the K&S property and the Foster Block property came to the planning board for preliminary discussions, and they're coming back with applications. The Foster Block property is proposing to go forward under a mixed-use multifamily residential overlay district. That's a section of the zoning bylaw which was approved at town meeting last May and is still under review by the Attorney General's office. So that application is on hold pending approval of the zoning district. Then we have the Westwood Glen Community Center and additional dwelling units. Westwood Glen is a senior housing facility just off of High Street on Westwood Glen Road behind Westwood Town Hall. They have 156 units of senior housing, 1 and 2 bedroom units, and they are proposing adding 2 additional units in space that is currently used as their community room and their office, and they're proposing to build a new standalone community center at the site. This project has received approval from the Zoning Board of Appeals, and it is now preparing to go before the Planning Board for its site plan review approval. Then we have the Hanlon Deerfield Elementary School project that's received all the approvals it needs from the Conservation Commission. It is before the Planning Board, coming back at the December meeting for a modification to the landscape plan to allow for a restoration of trees that were inadvertently cut down along a fire road. We have the Homes at 45. That is an open space residential development project on the former Westwood Lodge property. This has been in the works since 2018, and it's nearing completion. The last 2 units of townhouses are ready, almost ready to get their certificates of occupancy. That'll be the final step in that project. Then we have the Westwood Estates subdivision off of Hedgerow Lane. This is a 10-lot single family subdivision. The last house is under construction, and that's also nearing completion. I didn't put on this list, but we also have the Morgan Farm subdivision, which is nearing completion. It just needs its final pavement of the roadway, and then we'll schedule that for approval, as well as another open space residential development at Far Reach Road called Recess Way. So those are in progress, nearing completion. Other projects, we're working on the comprehensive plan implementation. You may recall the comprehensive plan was updated in 2020. That was the first update since 2000. And there's a long chart at the end of that with implementation strategies, and it assigns lead agencies to the various strategies, assigns timeframes. We're working with all those lead agencies to help them to move along with the implementing actions that are recommended in the comprehensive plan. We're also working on updates to rules and regulations for all of the boards that I mentioned, and we're working on proposed zoning bylaw and general bylaw amendment warrant articles. So quite a bit of work for the department, especially when we're down 3 staff members at present. So that's my introduction for the Department of Community and Economic Development, and now I'll turn it over to Chris to speak to the Planning Board and what their authority is and what they're working on.
Thank you, Nora. Just real quick, George, do you want to give an opportunity for questions if there are any now, or you want
That's
to wait?
okay with you, Chris. I mean, I would like to. I think, Nora, that was such a thorough presentation, and realize how comprehensive your responsibilities are. So yes, let's open it up and see if anybody has any questions or comments.
So Alex had his hand up, George.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Nora, great presentation. Thanks for the overview. I'm curious, does the town or your office, or maybe it's just you individually, do outward sort of marketing and education about opportunities for economic development in town, or is it mostly inbound? And I ask, and I know that the Topgolf was finally announced over the line in Canton, and I know the exit ramp for 95 North is opening sometime this century. And I'm curious if we're using those two, those two relatively near-term opportunities to further market the University Avenue sort of current warehousing type space into more, more B2C opportunities for folks that are going to be in that area.
So the short answer is yes, we do marketing. We've done more in the past than we're done currently due to staffing constraints. But we have actively marketed the sites that are available. We also work with the property owners to market their individual sites. We've worked with the owners of University Station for many years, and they are now proposing to develop their final lot there. There are some other property owners that own extensive properties. One is UniAv Development that owns 2 properties on University Avenue, as well as a property on Glacier Drive. And then we have SecLock, formerly called Security Lock Distributors, and they own 3 properties on the University Avenue side of the town. And we've worked with them for quite a while to try and assist them in attracting new users. We also worked with the owner Seon, who has 26 Dartmouth Street, and they are the ones that are proposing the 24M lithium ion battery research development facility. And we worked with the Fosters for many years on trying to redevelop their property on Everett Street. And there finally is a proposal that it's come before the planning board twice now for preliminary discussions, and hopefully will come back in the near future if the Attorney General approves the zoning.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions or comments?
Yeah, George, let me jump in here. Nora, this organization is relatively recent. How long has it been since you've been the head of the Economic Development Division?
So the division was created, or the department was created from all these separate divisions, which previously existed as their own departments in 2014. They were all coalesced. Town administrator at the time, Mike Gillette, wanted to have a land use. It's rather long title, Community and Economic Development, Department of Community and Economic Development, but essentially it's the land use department. And they wanted to get all the land use divisions put together, much like we have the finance department or the Department of Public Works that have several different divisions that represent different areas of work that they do. Mike Gillette wanted to combine all of the different organizations within the town that dealt with land use together into this Community and Economic Development Department. So it's been, how long is that? Almost 8 years? Well, actually a little over 8 years.
Thanks.
Well, I just want to say, Nora, that was a very, very thorough presentation. And I think that your staffing chart is that picture's worth 1,000 words. There is a lot of responsibility for what you do in your department. And so once again, thank you so very much for taking the time to present this material to us. And I wanted to welcome Christina to the meeting. And in addition to that, let me turn it back over to Chris.
George, can I interject for one quick second, or one follow-on question I forgot
Yes.
to ask? You mentioned the Home 2 hotel that was approved. Do you have an idea of timing on when construction will commence or when it is slated to open?
I don't. I know that New England Development has now transferred the property to the new owners at Home 2. So they went through the permitting while New England Development owned it. And the transfer occurred, I believe, in August. I know it was sometime over the summer. So I expect they're getting their financing all in hand, and we should hear from them shortly. But I don't have a firm date for when they'll break ground.
Yeah, and I ask in part out of curiosity, but also in part because that will obviously increase the home and the hotel and meals tax that is part of the budget every year. So if that's going to come online in, I don't know, 2024, or it'd be just a good thing for us to note. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Nora, once again, thank you. Jim, just saw you joined us. Welcome. So with that, we'll turn it back over to Chris Pfaff.
Thanks, George. Nora, if you could share your, thank you. I see you started. So as you saw, the planning board is just one of the responsibilities of community and economic development that Nora heads up. And we're very fortunate that right now, as we're in between town planners, that we have access to Nora to fill in that role. We are a board of 5 members, as it says here, elected for 3-year terms, overlapping, and members serve without compensation. The board meets regularly, maintains a public record of all its proceedings, resolutions, determinations. And generally speaking, the planning board's responsibility is for the general physical, economic, environmental planning of the town under the general laws, this charter, and town bylaws. I'll read through these things, and then I'll get a little more granular. Planning board warrant articles, potential. We have maybe some changes to the earth material movement, environmental development, design review, approval, moving it to a more administrative. Secondly, the EIDR design review for sustainability, which was a result of the comprehensive plan recently adapted in 2020, and then also for rooftop solar on commercial structures. And general bylaw amendments that we're looking at for next year are a new tree preservation bylaw and then a new dumpster maintenance bylaw. We decided that they would probably be best served as a general bylaw amendment instead of zoning. Our upcoming meeting schedule is pretty self-explanatory. We plan out our schedule to accommodate our zoning bylaw change format, and it involves obviously the Finance and Warrant Commission, where we come before your commission to explain our zoning bylaw changes proposal. And we're obviously all the way through the winter into the spring, and then culminating in the town meeting in early May. Was that it, Nora? Is that the last slide? Okay. So that's a general overview. On a more granular level, the planning board really has a function of two arms, and it's proactive and reactive. And reactive, I think everyone is familiar with. We get applications for development in our town, and we read those applications, we hear the presentations, and we weigh them against the current zoning that exists for the property that they're looking to develop. And in my opinion, when I was brought in on the planning board, it was explained to me, and I adhered to this. A good planning board member comes to every application with an open mind and assesses the merit of every application on its own, and comes to every hearing with no preconceived idea of what I want out of this individually, but what is good for the town and how does it measure against the zoning that we have in place. That's the reactive side in a nutshell, is us responding to applications. And some applications can be quite quick and some can become quite lengthy. The second is the proactive, and that is the adoption, amending, or revising our current zoning. And that's typically what we engage in, is revisions of existing zones. It's basically tweaks to either keep current with trends going on in development, or in some cases, when we designed the FMUOD zones and they're dotted throughout the town, it's to enhance opportunities for community and economic development, to attract businesses into areas that otherwise would go dormant and not zoned for current trends of development and things like that. That's the arm that in which we come before you. So we roughly speaking, we have a very short period of time to generate our zoning amendments and get them to a fully baked set of amendment changes, and then present to you. And that really is probably our second or third public presentation that we present. So there are hopefully understandably by your commission that we make changes in response to what the feedback that we're getting, both the public feedback in our own meetings, and then from the feedback from the FinCom. So we don't expect to go into these presentations with for lack of a better way to put it, a fully baked, done deal set of zoning changes. We expect to make changes, not wholesale changes. We think we're generally on the right path, but we want public input and input from the FinCom to fully craft a zoning amendment that doesn't just reflect the 5 planning board members' opinions, but the 15 members of FinCom, and then also however many public residents want to engage us in discussion throughout our public process. So that, generally speaking, those are the two arms that our planning board engages in throughout the year. And a lot, if not all, of the projects that Nora presented in her presentation did come through the planning board. And they obviously all received positive votes, and that's why they're they're complete now or on their way to being complete. So again, it's a high level view of the planning board, and if you know, there's a lot more to it, but on a general level, it's that's what we do. So I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have for planning board.
George, let me call on myself here. Chris, what can you share with us about the tree preservation amendment? I'm intrigued by that.
Well, we started discussing it at our last meeting 24 hours ago, just about, and recognizing that I think it came up first in our hazardous, forgive me, Nora, can you chime in here?
Hazardous mitigation plan.
Thank you. Hazardous mitigation plan that was presented to us, and maintaining and expanding our tree canopy was the primary interest there, and realizing that we really don't have a formal tree replacement policy in place, and there are towns that do. So we're going to look into what might work for Westwood for developments that have to take down some trees. Understandably, if a building needs to go somewhere, there might be opportunity where we can replace those trees, and instead of just calling them gone, we might be able to replace them with trees that eventually may grow into that same mature state.
Is this primarily aimed at commercial development?
Doesn't have to be. I know other towns may implement these through the Conservation Commission, not the planning board. So we're going to look at all aspects of, we're not, it has been done before in other towns, so we're not necessarily going to reinvent a wheel. So we may look at what's working in these other towns and see if there's a way we can start from there and then tweak it to make it work for our town.
I look forward to hearing more about it. Jim Ferraro, you had your hand up.
Thank you. Chris, just to follow up on that, is it for developments or are you planning on attaching that to individual homeowners?
Well, I think, again, we've only had one meeting and we just raised it. We didn't discuss it as a board yet. I think the general rule of thumb is if you came to the planning board for something or conservation for something, then this might be something that would be in place as a condition of whatever it is you're proposing to do. Generally speaking, the planning board does not get involved with single family home issues. That's left to the building department, but that could be something that we could look at if it's involved there, or if it's just for conservation issues for single family homes, or obviously commercial development as well.
On a separate note, Nora, what's our percentage of affordable housing in town? And have they ruled on whether, what is it, the ancillary apartments are part of that number?
So we received the denominator from the US Census for the 2020 census, and the denominator they counted was 5,801. Prior to the most recent list of housing units that we submitted for inclusion on the SHI, which have not yet been included, we're waiting for the December report. But prior to that, we had 598 affordable units that were on the SHI. So that got us to 10.3 with the additional 19 units that are pending for addition. I believe we come up to, let me just confirm, 10.6. That would be our current status of affordable housing units on the subsidized housing inventory, assuming all of the units that we submitted are approved. The units that were recently submitted were 2 group homes, one on Winter Street, the LifeWorks group home, one on High Street, the Till group home, 2 affordable townhomes at the Homes at 45, I believe 4 Westwood Affordable Housing Authority property units. I'm trying to think of what am I forgetting? Oh, and then the 2 units at Washington Street, part of the Islington Center development. I believe the address is 260, 263, 265, somewhere along there on Washington Street, 2 upper story units. So together we have 19 new units that are proposed, all of which have had approved local action unit applications, all of which have signed deed restrictions by the Department of Housing and Community Development. We're just now waiting for them to officially list them.
And are ancillary apartments a factor?
So I haven't seen the granular details from the 2020 census data yet to know whether they've been counted. The number that they gave us, 5,801 units, suggests to me that they have not counted the accessory apartments as individual units.
Do we expect a definite answer on that anytime in the future?
So no, I don't think so. I think that in 2030, when they do the next census, they make new decisions about their definitions for what they count as a housing unit and what they don't. The most recent in 2020, their definition was a little bit nebulous, and it looks like in some cases they may have counted units, perhaps units that had separate addresses, and maybe they didn't count units that were within a structure. So you can have an accessory apartment in an existing residential structure or adjacent to a residential structure. So I don't have the granular detail yet to know whether they counted any, some. So I have to see that, but their definition is pretty flexible. That's for accessory units. And then there's for assisted living units. Those are counted on based on how they're reported by the organization. That's how they counted them in 2020. I don't believe they counted the units at the memory care facility at University Station. And I don't believe they counted the units at the Till group home. I don't know about other units, how they were counted, whether they were counted or not. And then there's the Fox Hill Village 24 unit accessory assisted living units. I don't believe they counted those as individual units. I believe they counted that as a group housing facility.
Thank you.
Christina, welcome this evening. I noticed you had your hand up.
Yes. I just want to say thank you, Chris. I am extraordinarily happy about the tree conservation idea. I think it's lovely. It's one of those things where, you know, we talked so much about development last year, and I was really concerned about the lack of focus on conservation. So I'm really energized and excited to hear that. And you know, please do keep us apprised of that. My other question was, I did notice a Mumford development on there, and it didn't seem like it was the Tumble Bus development. Did I miss something? Are we doing an additional Mumford development?
No, that's it. The Tumble Bus site. It's Everett Street. That's the
Same one.
proposed site. Everett
It's
Street.
also called the
So
Foster
some people
Block.
call it the Tumble Bus site. It's the Foster property. It's owned by the Fosters, former site of Foster Brick. So that's what we call it. But it has many different names. That is the one and only property that's being proposed. And that application will not go forward unless and until the Attorney General's office approves the Mumford zone.
Okay. And is that application, I know there is some back and forth, like we had approved like 100 and change units, and then the developer wanted over 200.
So the application has not been filed because there's no zoning under which to file it. But the applicant did come before the planning board twice in, I think it was in September and in August and July and August, or August and September. I can't remember
I
right
think
now.
it's July and September.
July and September. So he came first with a proposal for, I believe, 225 units, which would have to be considered under a special permit under that district. The planning board expressed some concern about the number of units. He revised his plans and he came back with a reduced plan for 158 units. That would still require a special permit. So he has yet to file an application. He left that planning board pre-application discussion with the planning board saying they would still like to see further reduction in the number of units. If an applicant came forward with a proposal for no more than 15 units per acre, and at that site, that would be a maximum of 102 units, then that could be considered by right. But anything over that number would have to only be considered as a special permit.
Okay. And who's the developer again?
Giorgio Petruzziello Properties.
Okay. Thank you. And good job on the tree stuff, Chris. I'd love to see more,
Thank you.
more conservation as much as we can jam into it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Sean,
Hi, thank you, both Chris and Nora, for the wonderful presentations and the great overview. It's very informative. Chris, not to belabor the tree point, I did just want to know, from my awareness, I know that the Conservation Commission and perhaps their most recent meeting were starting to have conversations about the tree policy as well. And I don't know how much, I don't have enough awareness to know how much overlap there is with that work and what the planning board is considering, but I wanted to bring it to your attention in case you knew of areas where there might be overlap and opportunities for collaboration. But I recognize it's a little out of the vein of the work we're doing here today.
No, it's fine. We are not going to be in a position where we would overstep our bounds into conservation. If they have a policy in place that they go by, a loose or a structure, I don't know. But we would never presume to supersede them. We would work with them in crafting something so it works. The two agencies work well together. We try to play well with others, and we're not going to try to make things hard on a developer or a homeowner or anything like that. But we do recognize we have goals as a town, and the tree preservation is part of that.
Right.
If I could just add a little information. So the Conservation Commission treats their properties on a one-to-one basis. When they receive an application under the Wetlands Preservation Act, the general policy, where possible, is they require a one-for-one tree replacement. If you take down a tree, you need to add another tree somewhere on the site. In cases where there's no room on a site to add those trees, they accept payment into a tree fund or donation of a tree to be planted at another location. So they do have a policy they've been using for many years. But it only applies when there's a project that comes before them, either under the Wetlands Protection Act and local wetlands bylaw, or under the Stormwater Management Act, which that's a local stormwater management bylaw. And then only if it's for a Conservation Commission approved stormwater permit, which is when there's disturbance of land of a half acre or more. So there are many properties where the disturbance is less than a half an acre, where many trees are removed. If it's a commercial property, the planning board has some ability now under its current bylaw to require additional trees, but they want to firm up and have a blanket policy that can be equally applied, that recognizes the, whatever that ratio is of trees coming down and trees being added. Currently, the planning board's policy is really to enforce the zoning bylaw requirements that have street tree requirements, perimeter landscaping requirements, but it really is not based on how many trees have been removed. So I think the goal there is to draw a relationship between tree removal and tree replacement. And it would be townwide. There may be different standards for commercial properties than for residential properties, but I think it would apply across the town. So that's something the planning board just discussed last night. We're looking at Lexington, Weston, and a couple of other towns that have tree preservation bylaws, and we'll see what we can use from those.
Thank you. That's very helpful, and looking forward to seeing what the planning board comes up with.
Caitlin.
Great, thank you. Nora, quick follow-up question. So the group homes that you mentioned on High Street and Winter Street, are those current group homes or those are proposed homes for the future?
Those are current group homes, but they're group homes that have only been developed since our last subsidized housing inventory was produced. So we have other group homes throughout the town, and all of the other units are already listed on the subsidized housing inventory.
Great, thank you.
Well, if that's it, I want to extend a very strong thank you to both Nora and Chris. I think getting this type of overview of your responsibilities and what you do is, I think, very, very helpful. It really gives us a context. I think in the past, sometimes we haven't had that. And the members who joined late, I really would strongly encourage you, go back and look at Nora's presentation, because it really, her breadth of responsibility is a bit astounding, but it also puts things in perspective. So thank you both very, very much. Okay.
Very welcome.
Thanks for having us.
George, I assume that we're going to get a copy of those slides sent to Victoria.
Yes, I will send it to Victoria when I get off.
Yeah, they're very, very good. Thank you so very much, both of you. You're
Thank
more
you.
than welcome
Thank
to
you.
stay, but you don't have to, because I know, Chris, you guys have busy, lots on your agenda, okay?
I'm heading to the zoning meeting, so.
All right. Well,
Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Let me jump to the chair's update. Not too many things, but I think just about everybody has submitted their request for committee assignments. Mr. Parade and I will sit down and go over it. We'll come back with to discuss with some of you who would like to maybe ask you to serve as chairs and what committees you would like to be on. And I think we want to get that resolved before December's meeting. You all should have received a online version of the 5-year capital plan. Don't be intimidated by it. A lot of it is very detailed information, but it gives you a very good perspective of what the town is including in the 5-year capital plan and how they're starting to think about prioritizing things. And I think, as I've told you, this year we're going to have a special capital planning group that's going to look at all the capital requests townwide. And I've asked Chris Pareda to take responsibility for putting that group together. So I think if you get a chance, please try and read or skim through that material over the next month or so.
Hey, George, I have a quick question for you.
Yes.
At what point will we discuss or review, whether internally or with the broader, with the submitters, the actual capital plan?
Chris, do you want to respond to that?
Well, typically, George, in January, when the sponsors of each warrant article come before us, they will then show us how they plan to spend the next fiscal year's money, both in operating revenue and any capital projects that they want for their division. I'm hoping that the capital group, though, is going to meet with some of these division heads before that, so we can get an idea of what they're thinking and maybe influence how it's presented in the warrant article. We don't want 6 or 7 capital projects all lumped together when one of those might be so controversial that it might sink the entire warrant article.
Yeah, I guess what's complex about it is you have lots of large line items, and I wonder what the sequencing is, because if we approve one department's capital budget, and then we start realizing that maybe in aggregate there are two, that there might be more than we want to take on, then does the one that requires approval later on in the process get shortchanged? I'm just trying to figure out the sequencing.
No, we'll see the whole thing at once.
Okay.
And, so there's not going to be any of that. What we just and typically what Pam did was she would group capital projects by the funding source, and you'd have a warrant article where all capital projects funded by free cash were all lumped together. And over the past couple of years, that's produced some issues when one of those projects was controversial or presented some issues, and we had no choice but to say, okay, town meeting, go ahead and approve all of them, or our only option is to recommend the town approve none of them. So we want to get ahead of that and try to meet with some of these division heads before January to try to see what their thinking is in order to stave off that kind of a dilemma for us.
Okay, is that scheduled yet, or is that to
No,
be scheduled?
Not yet.
Chris?
Okay, because I did have some questions about some of the things that I saw in there.
Okay, Chris and I have met with the town administrator. We have told them that as soon as they get their recommendations through the select board, that we want to start the process of having our capital group meet with the town manager and his respective department heads. It may be one, it may be several meetings, okay? So that we can get an in-depth understanding of the entire capital budget, so that when it comes to the FinCom, we put it into context. And that's the thing Chris and I have really tried to change this year as part of the process. And we'll see how it works, okay?
Yeah, if you look at that.
Chris, you're muted.
No, I don't think so. So Michael, do you have? a
No,
question?
I just said, Chris, we can hear you. No,
Oh,
I
okay,
don't
all
know
right.
George was hearing you.
So, yeah, if you look at that long-range capital document that got sent to you, you can, I looked through it and I sort of went through it and I said to myself, unless the town plans on winning the lottery, this isn't going to happen. So there's a lot of work to be done to try to figure out what the priorities are.
Yeah, and the other thing I noticed, and it made me curious about the process, is some of those requested budgets were noted that they were requested in previous fiscal years. And so, I'm just curious to learn about this process and to see how we'll go about approving and how they decide what goes in, what comes out when they aggregate and approve the final version.
Personally, I look at each project based on the merits that it has at the time. And it really doesn't matter to me whether it's been proposed 5 years in a row or this is the first time we see it. It's what's best for the town at the time.
Okay. All right, so that's the process for the capital budget. I guess the other thing I want to mention, I think, Victoria, how many members did we have today make the meeting? 10 or 11? So I think I see
I counted 10 at one time,
10.
George.
11.
Yeah, somebody had to drop off and come back. And I guess, look, I think I understand that in today's modern world, there are a lot of demands on people, but attendance becomes extremely important, especially as we start getting warrant articles coming before us. And I think the issue is that in order to vote on a warrant article that's presented to us, I don't think you can miss more than one meeting when that article is presented. So one of the things I wanted to ask everybody is this, if assuming we go Zoom until the 2 spring meetings where we really want to get together when we do our voting, but do people, is 6 o'clock better than 7 o'clock? What works for committee members? I realize how busy everybody is, but attendance is going to become extremely important, literally starting in January. So what works best for people? Do you want to stay with the 6 if we're on Zoom?
I personally don't. 6 o'clock, I've got the West Coast responsibilities for work. So for me, 7 o'clock is better. I can make it work, and I can, like tonight, I can be late if I have to.
Okay. What about, I guess, Alex and
Yeah,
Chris,
I'll just second the 7 o'clock, just with kids and work and all that. Definitely easier, a little bit later to start for me.
okay. Who
Caitlin?
else?
Yeah, I just agree with that. I think 7 o'clock is better with, commuting again and with schedules. It's a little
Okay.
bit easier.
Christina?
I am in the minority. I work European hours, very, very early in the morning. So 6 works better for me, but I can accommodate anything really.
Sean?
I don't have a huge preference either way, but I'm curious if, even if we do 7 o'clock, if there's any marathon sessions that we anticipate on the calendar, we ever might make an exception for one of those just to avoid us getting off at obnoxiously late hours in the evening. But that I recognize that may interfere with people's work schedules as well. So I want to be accommodating.
Sean, that's a good point, especially when we do our spring meetings. I mean, the 2 voting sessions, which tend to be our long meetings. Let me ask this, should we try, for December and January, and you have the full meeting schedule out there. Should we try 7 o'clock just to see if that accommodates people's schedules a little bit better? Is everybody okay with that? All right, fine. Let's go with 7. And that way, if we'll try it. In fact, we're going to assume 7 o'clock. I like Sean's recommendation. If we do anticipate a longer meeting, we may move it back, to give people a little bit better time. And also the fact that, look, if you have to join late, I understand that. But attendance, especially in January, becomes extremely important. All right. Does anybody else have any new business items they want to bring up? Alex, your hand is up, your little
Yeah.
hand is raised.
George, can I just make one request, which may
Yeah.
not maybe appreciated by some, but not by others. Is there any way that Victoria could send a calendar invite out for the upcoming meetings? I know some people use calendars. I personally sort of live and die by mine. And so if it's not too much to have the calendar invite with the Zoom link, that way we know if it's 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. Realize that some people may not use calendars, so you can just ignore the invite and let it live in your inbox. But if that's at all a reasonable request, and something that Victoria would be so kind to accommodate, that would be
All right.
super helpful for me.
Do we think we can do that? A lot of my meetings get set up that way with the calendar invite.
I'll try to get that set up with the calendar. Because I'm using Outlook just on like the web browser, so it might be a little different, but I'll
We'll
definitely-
give it a try. Yeah, let's give it a try and see if we can do that, okay? All right, has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes?
I did, and I had a question about, there was a follow-up that was requested, and it was not mentioned in the minutes, nor did I see the follow-up. It was asked of, I asked it during, Mayor Plotkin's segment, and then I think, George, you suggested that we ask Pam Dukeman to follow up. It was with regard to the difference in interest rate that was executed versus what was, projected to the town publicly, and so we thought it would be appropriate to update that.
George, we did ask for as a follow-up item, and the one response we got is there was Chris, do you remember which slide it was? There was a presentation. One of the background materials did address that issue, but not completely the way you and I wanted to see it addressed. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, I don't know what slide it is, but I had a conversation with Chris Coleman, and he told me it's in the slide package, but it really didn't answer the question. I thought it might be better to hold off until we talk about the budget in January, and then bring it up again.
George, because what you raised, as I recall, you raised the issue that if we went out at 3.7%, what was the impact over the 30 years over the financing? In the slides they presented, they did show a 2%, 3%, and 4%. Although they did tend to focus back then, it's when interest rates were lower, 2%. But they did show the 3%.
Right, and that was what was in the projected budget. Yeah. And all I said was we owe it to the town to update it with the actual.
And I think what Chris and I, and you raised a very valid point. So what Chris and I are going to do, we discussed it since we put one request in. We will ask for, as part of the budget process, a full 30-year table to see the exact cost, both principal and interest, over the period of the loan. Okay, it was a very valid question, and neither Chris and I have forgotten it. Okay.
Oh no, and it's fine. I'm not rushing the response. I just wanted the minutes to reflect that was an outstanding item.
Okay, I guess then I will ask Victoria. I will get that added in. Okay. Let me just see if I'm just looking at it real quick. We will add an item in referencing that request. Okay. So can I get a motion approving the minutes subject to that being added in?
I will move that we approve the minutes, subject to making the amendment that George just discussed.
Okay. Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor? I guess we have to do a roll. I'm sorry, we have to do roll calls. Town council reminded me of that. So can we get a roll call? We'll do a quick roll call on this. Victoria?
Jim?
Yes.
Lauren?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
George Hertz?
Yes.
Angela?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
George Marone?
Yes.
Christina?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
and Alex.
Yes.
Okay, and I actually will review that language with Chris Parade, and we'll make sure that gets included. The other thing I want to say is, I think we've made huge progress in the quality of our minutes. We struggled with a lot of this last year, but I think the minutes are very much reflective of the discussions, and I'm glad that George Maroon, you picked up the one item that needed to be added in. That's why we do a review in the minutes. So thank you for doing that. With that, is there anybody from the public or press who has any questions or comments who wants to say anything to us? Hearing none, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting? And once again, we have to do a roll call, but can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, second. All right, Victoria, you take the roll call, please, and we'll adjourn the meeting. Victoria, we do the roll
Yes.
call.
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
George Hertz,
Yes.
Angela,
Yes.
Caitlin,
Yes.
George Maroon,
Yes.
Christina,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
and Alex.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. And 7 o'clock in December, okay? And thanks everybody for being here. Enjoy,
Good
have a
night, all.
very
Bye,
happy
everyone.
Thanksgiving, everybody, okay?
Happy Thanksgiving.